Hi, this is StrategyCast, where smart marketers and bold business thinkers share the plays behind brand breakthroughs. I'm Lori Jones, President and CEO of Avocet Communications. Innovation that lasts doesn't start with a product, it starts with a purpose. Today, we're exploring how brands that lead with meaning build stronger connections, more loyal customers, and more powerful growth. My guest, Lori Oliver, has spent over 2 decades guiding companies like the Coca-Cola Company, Home Depot, and Spanx, and now helps startups and established brands alike bring purpose to life through design and innovation. We'll unpack what it really takes to align innovation with authenticity and how purpose can become a catalyst for business success.
A competitive edge starts with strategy, and strategy starts with knowing how to develop one. StrategyCast is a leading marketing podcast that serves up strategic insights, trends, and tips to help separate your business from the pack. Tune in weekly as host Lori Jones interviews bold marketing leaders who have priceless wisdom and are willing to share. Each episode explores cutting-edge approaches that have proven instrumental in transforming brands into industry trailblazers.
Welcome to the show, Lori.
Thank you, Lori. Great name.
And we spell it the same too.
I know.
So Lori Oliver, Lori Jones, we could go Lojo.
There we go.
Anyways, I'm so excited to chat with you today. What an incredible background. Before we get to the nitty gritty, tell us a little bit more about your story.
Well, my story begins mostly in Athens, Georgia, a small, at the time, southern university town where I grew up. My dad was a professor there, exercise physiology, PhD. My mom was a nurse administrator working for the county. And, I have to hand it to them. They both worked really hard, but they were both really progressive. And my dad especially was an innovator. He developed a program at the University of Georgia for graduate and undergraduate students in the 70s that still runs today.
Wow,
So,
that is so
I mean,
cool.
I know. It really is. They've, highlighted him in the newsletter recently, and it's just really nice. He's 90 years old.
That's awesome. That is so awesome. I love it.
And I mention it mostly because, my parents both inspired me in a lot of ways, which I'm sure we'll get to. But I think that really shaped my journey. So back when I was the middle child of 3, we were all 20 months apart. Nobody got a college tour, that sort of thing back in those days. So guess what? I went to the University of Georgia. I graduated with a journalism degree, have a great journalism school, always have. But right after I graduated, I moved to Los Angeles. I'd never been there. I'd never been to the state of California or the West Coast at all. But I, had been feeling for a long time that I needed something bigger. Athens at that time especially felt very small, a little suffocating.
Right.
And so I moved to LA, and that's where I began my professional career, working for a Fortune 50 corporation, starting with a government contracting portion of the company. Back in those days, it was a big, conglomerate, but it was very segmented. So there was an aerospace company, then there was a financial services company. So I started in aerospace as a communications specialist.
Wow.
Turned out not a lot of the ex-military, type of employees that worked there were great writers. So it was an opportunity for me to use my journalism degree. And, I had a top secret clearance, security clearance with the DoD. And I was helping to draft proposals to the government, big, scary stuff. So that's how I started. But big corporate environment, was very enticed by the financial services part of the company and was lucked into a job there secondly after about a year and 2 years with that financial services division in a part of the company that was essentially hiring 12 people to start a new company within the company. And so I was able to be part of this entrepreneurial team inside a big corporate structure.
Wow.
And we developed a business that we grew. It was a real estate loan services business. It was for all the consumers out there trying to buy homes. And
Wow.
very fragmented industry. There were appraisal companies, and there were title insurance companies, and there were mom and pop mortgage document companies, but nobody had really put together all the services that a home buyer needed to buy a home. So that was our charge.
Yeah. And you did it.
And we did it. We grew this to $360 million in three
Wow.
years. So and it was
And,
huge.
well, and now you have your own consultancy, which of course we're going to talk about. Something that you said very early on in the conversation today, I just like made my heart just so warm. And I think that I grew up in a very creative environment. My father started Avocet. He was a creative director, at very, very large companies prior to that, prior to doing his own, building his own firm. And
Mhm.
I think you learn as a child so much through osmosis. You being around innovators and me being around creativity and, of course, innovation and entrepreneurialism as well. And what do you feel, what are those key attributes of your upbringing that you brought to each one of these companies that you've worked with, over time and now your own company birth?
Especially in terms of purpose-driven design. I mean, starting with health and exercise matter.
Ah,
Being a healthy human matters.
it
I don't
does.
care what you do
Ah,
otherwise. I also learned, like you just said, creativity and innovation matter. You
mm,
have to look at things, maybe break them, maybe not, maybe just incrementally change something, but look at things critically and not be afraid to change things.
yeah,
Um, and then I think the other thing I learned from them is solving actual problems matters.
I
you
agree.
know,
And communication is, a big piece of that. Yeah.
it is, it really is.
Looking back at the incredible experience that you have, was there a particular project or a brand that you worked on that really helped crystallize your philosophy regarding purpose-led innovation?
Yes, I mean, it would 100% have to be Spanx.
Uh,
What happened after California? I spent almost a decade in Los Angeles, married very young, had a child, got a divorce, and decided I needed to move back closer to family because I had a 16-month-old child and I was a single
wow.
parent.
Yeah.
So I started there in a more of a consulting agency, kind of different roles there, and remarried, had two more kids, so three kids total. But the long story short is all of the next couple, decade plus led me to Spanx in kind of a very roundabout way. I mean, I was over 50 when I started working at Spanx to start with, and I had already had corporate experience, consulting experience, and entrepreneurial experience. So it just, the stars aligned that I was able to. And Sarah with Spanx was at a point in her journey where she really was wanting to take a slight step back from the company. She didn't want to leave, but she didn't want to continue to be active CEO day to day.
Right.
So as she hired an ex Nike executive to come in to take that role, she really needed and wanted somebody to work with her directly to start an incubator, kind of expand her brand, but also expand her purpose, really make good. She'd done a great job building Spanx as a purpose-driven company to begin with, but she really wanted to take it even a step further. So I would have to say that my experience at Spanx probably was where things really crystallized in terms of, how do you act on purpose, and what does that mean at scale?
Don't I love this so much because I think, we both have a lot of experience. We've been at this a long time. And there's so much wisdom that you gain every day you work. I mean, it just is compounding, right? And the fact that at age 50, you had this epiphany of all those years leading up to it probably would not have happened without all those years leading up to it. But the fact that it happened at 50 just goes to show you how much more wisdom there is to be had. And we can never forget that as leaders and innovators and disruptors, quite frankly.
Exactly. Being really honest, I had worked so many years in agency roles and consulting roles that I finally got to the point in my 40s where I was a little cynical about, if I have to solve the same problem for different brand,
Yeah,
I just can't. And so I initially was actually inspired by my own daughter who was entering middle school at the time. And I decided to be an entrepreneur just as I turned 50. And I started a company called WOPO,
mm,
which was short for Woman Power. And I developed a line of base layers for younger girls. Now, this is before Skims. This is Spanx that didn't even
right,
think about any kind of a younger consumer. The intention, I was watching my daughter and her friends, just use their lacrosse shorts, for example, under their prom dresses.
right.
They were just looking for a little smoothness,
Yeah,
they weren't going to wear highly compressive undergarments at the same
yeah,
time. So anyway, I also thought this was a great opportunity to integrate purpose, because I saw these girls as the future of feminism. And I thought that they should have a platform to really redefine what feminism meant. And if
right,
this was when social media really was in almost infancy.
right.
So anyway, it was really that decision and that risk that kind of cemented my destiny with Sarah, working with Sarah, which is
Neat.
no, I
Yeah.
didn't plan at all.
Yeah. Well, what a special story to even, be able to reflect on it and how your daughter, you know, just as a side, watching her and seeing her really led to some of those epiphanies that you had. When a brand leads with purpose, what are the first tangible places that it should show up? You think about product design and customer experience, community affairs, packaging, all these different things. Depending on if it's a CPG client or a retail client or a B2B client or a consultancy, it's all different.
Mhm. I think that despite the differences, it all has to start in the same place, and that is with the customer, obviously. I mean, and some research. And that's kind of going back to the things that I learned from Sarah and others, but Sarah was a master at it, that asking questions is the best way to truly uncover purpose, and being unafraid to ask the stupidest questions, or what might seem irrelevant, sometimes gets you the most on target answer that then leads to that beautiful nugget that becomes the purpose, then that easily then kind of explodes into product design and packaging and all the other elements. I mean, it should really be that easy. If
Yeah.
it's done right, it is that easy. So
I think
um,
the struggle is real, though. If you think about it, we work with a lot of companies that have very complex narratives,
mhm,
and they typically begin with a scientist, a chemist, an engineer who
mhm,
who
yep,
has found a way to solve an issue.
yeah,
And I think it's difficult working with those mindsets to help them think through what purpose is. What advice, besides solving problem A and B, what advice do you have for working with those mindsets with the individuals that it's just difficult to pull out of?
it is. But then I go back to Coca-Cola Company was started by a scientist. The
That's
product was
a great
invented.
point. Yeah.
um, you know, Phil Knight from Nike wasn't like a creative necessarily, so I think people, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I've worked with a ton of engineers. I think it helped more to look, selling is critical.
Yeah.
And it's critical for an initial definition of purpose, and then it's critical to maintain and integrate purpose into everything, and it never stops.
Right.
So, but what I found is it became a little bit easier, I thought, when I became a parent. And I sort of took a mom mindset in dealing with kind of a
Ah,
science
it
techy
sure does help.
engineering mindset.
Yeah.
Um, but I tried to, listen. Um, it is hard. I'm not going to say it's not hard.
Yeah.
There's not a silver bullet answer there, but I think that, look, Peloton, the founder of Peloton was obviously a creative risk taker, but he was also a Georgia Tech grad. My husband's a Georgia Tech grad. They are that mindset. I don't care if they
Ah,
majored in engineering or not. They are that mindset. And look what happened there. It gets complicated. I think you can start off well and then get sort of sidetracked by investors. There's so many different things at play.
yeah.
I
How
don't know that it's easy just to provide a solution.
Yeah, I agree. How do you adapt? You've worked with, the Fortune 50s and larger, well, there isn't a larger, but at the upper side of a Fortune 50 for sure. So you've guided, these massive corporations and nimble startups. How do you adapt your approach to purpose and innovation across these scales?
So I guess the best example I can give is with Home Depot and Coca-Cola. In working with them, we helped convince them to become Olympic sponsors. And in doing that, I mean, it's a huge investment from a marketing standpoint for this, and it's a big risk for the company, but we tried to show them why it made sense through the purpose lens. I mean, as well as an economic one. So I think companies like that, if you can offer something that's slightly different, that
Mhm.
maybe even makes them look at their business differently or creatively, that's helpful. Because I know that with both of those companies, once they really engaged with the Olympic movement, for example, they were inspired. I
Yeah.
mean, it almost had them double down on their own purpose. Home
Mhm.
Depot hired Olympic athletes to work in Home Depot companies, and then essentially let them and help train them be coaches for their other employees. Had them used an Olympics athletes' perseverance and inspiration to inspire other people that were employed at Home Depot. I thought that was wonderful. It's a wonderful execution of purpose that they hadn't thought of before.
Right.
Coca-Cola, unified not only consumers, but its employee base and bottlers and the whole system through an Olympic sponsorship,
Right.
because this whole idea of connection and refreshment in all sorts of senses of the word made sense to them when they looked at it differently than they did day to day.
Right. How does purpose fit in with mission, vision, and values?
I think that purpose is the beginning. That is the place that you start, and um, it's the core. You
Right.
know, you can't have anything mission values without purpose. It doesn't make sense. So, for example, at Spanx, the purpose is elevating women. Um, Everything comes from that.
Hmm.
The products, the way people are hired. I mean, the company is mostly has women employees, not exclusively, but largely. The foundation, the help for women entrepreneurs, and supporting other women to go out and do what Sarah did. Certainly, what we're doing with the inactive company. And,
Right.
the purpose there is really around solving the epidemic of sleeplessness. It's,
Yeah.
that's a critical problem. And so everything we're doing is coming from that. So it is the core.
Yeah. I love that. And tethering back, a special events, community affairs, community outreach, giving programs, and whatever it might be, to that very purpose-led ethos, I think is something that really helps, you know, with recruiting as well. It gives people a reason to believe. It's that North Star. It gives you a sense of belonging.
Absolutely. I think especially with, millennials and younger, that's what they're looking for. And I'm speaking from the experience of my kids and their friends, and all of the people that I've worked with that are younger than I am. I mean,
Mhm.
I've learned a lot from them. I don't pretend to know everything, but what that inspires them is exactly that. It's
That's
what
great.
is it beyond? Yeah, what's connecting me? What's the umbilical cord from me to the company?
Right.
I need the connection.
So, what is the public facing line for our listeners today? I'm sure they're thinking, okay, we've got a purpose, we've got an MVV, we've got a tagline, we've got a positioning statement, we've got a value prop, we've got a brand essence, we've got all these things. Provide our listeners today some insights on how you organize this from a brand strategy standpoint.
So I'll do it with the inactive company. So I founded the inactive company from my company birth, actually. A prospective entrepreneur came to me with this idea of a sleep mask. And, her idea was she had trouble sleeping, and her idea was to use a sleep mask because it had helped her sleep better. But she was a copywriter at heart.
Yeah.
And what she really wanted to do was put inspiring messages on the face of a sleep mask as it existed. I thought that was great. But as I dug in, and I'm an insomniac, I said, there's a ton of opportunity here, not dissimilar to what Sarah Blakely did with Spanx. But a
Mhm.
sleep mask is a 100-year-old product that's never really been innovated. So if we look at science and we innovate the product itself, we can actually solve a real problem in a very simple way and help people sleep better.
Mhm.
That was the beginning of tying together all the things you just mentioned to create this architecture. And, as we started talking, and Jill McRae, whom you will know too, but
Ah,
and I were both on the leadership team at Spanx. And we both started our own consulting companies separately after Spanx. And we were friends, and we were both health enthusiasts. And we ended up, when I found the sleep mask thing and I really wanted to innovate it, I pulled her in. And so she and I are co-founders in this company. And so as we begin to map out what this could look like, um, we knew the purpose was clear because we had a huge problem we were trying to solve that was almost universal. And we really just, it flowed so easily. We decided, as we, for example, decided what to name the company. We were like, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to change a whole culture of people like us who grew up thinking, I'll sleep when I'm dead. I don't need to get enough sleep. Let's start the meeting at 7:30 a.m. or let's, work until midnight, doesn't, all nighter for whatever. We have to change that culture and really show people that even though you're just laying there when you're sleeping, your body is actually working very hard, which is how we ended up branding the company the Inactive Company. We thought
yeah,
that was, almost said it all. And
right,
then the tagline became is ready, set, sleep. But we call ourselves a sleep performance company
right.
because it's not just like dreamy lay there sleep. It's like sleep and wake up and kick butt. It's that. And then who are we talking to? Well, they should be inactivists. So everything just sort of was easy. So I think that if you end up solving the problem and staying true, being committed to a purpose, sometimes it can be that easy.
Yeah, I think so too. And again, it just becomes stickier. It's kind of like that North Star, what are we,
Totally.
does everything ladder back up to it?
Absolutely.
Where do you feel are some of the most common mistakes you see when startups or even, enterprise companies chase innovation for innovation's sake, which is something we talk a lot about?
I don't think that they have enough patience.
Mhm.
It takes time to innovate,
Yeah,
and it takes budget, and companies think of it as overhead, and they get tired of investing in it sometimes, and it's perhaps many times mismanaged.
yeah,
So
yeah.
there's that. I think what I try to do is ask clients, companies, startups, whatever, on and on, over and over again, what problem are you solving?
Yeah.
Bringing them back to that. It's almost like bringing them back to their purpose, but okay, what problem are we solving? For whom?
Yep.
And how do you know they care? And just, you have to constantly check yourselves
Yeah.
on, are we on track?
Yeah.
And I think people just lose patience or just lose energy around staying committed and focused and consistent.
I think it's probably, dare I say, the most important question a leader of a company should be answering, because I think all too often what happened, we talk a lot in marketing um, with funnel management, that too many brands enter with an approach mid-funnel. So they've lost all the awareness on top, and it's going to take a very, very long time if if they succeed at all to really, achieve the growth that they're looking for, because they don't have that awareness. I
Right.
think the same thing actually happens here. I think a lot of times people enter with a snaggy slogan or a tagline because it makes sense, but if it doesn't ladder up to that ethos, that purpose, then it's always going to get lost. It's always going to need to be changed because you don't have that stronghold of where you want to be going long term.
Exactly. And I think too, you have to, even if you do maintain a similar purpose and change out the tagline or the company just evolves, if you don't stay focused on enacting it in every part of your company, it's still not going to work.
Yeah.
I was early on inspired by Tom's shoes and the whole one for one, and
Yeah.
a charismatic leader, and really embodied kind of the purpose, and everything felt very aligned, even though he was pretty innovative for the time
Yeah.
and what he was doing. Um, apparently the company sort of lost its way. Maybe not, that's not, maybe not fair, but they went from 600 plus $1 million company back in the day to currently a tagline, for example, that's wear good, which still tries to express the one for one, but the company has shrunk fivefold.
Do you think it's changed for change's sake? I mean, did they really need to change what they had going? And CMOs are really good at that.
Yeah.
They come into a role and the first thing they want to do is make change, instead of building upon what is already good and keeping what's working in place.
Yes. So we used to call that, maybe you still do, not invented here.
Yeah.
Itis.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it can be very harmful. I I agree. I think that does happen, and I don't know if that's what happened here alone, but
Yeah.
it's
And I
across.
think, it's interesting because we've talked about a lot of, early stage startup brands where, purpose was built from day one. And then you've got a lot of very enterprise brands and those brands' purpose can evolve, kind of like Aunt Jemima did all those years, from a branding standpoint, there's evolution. But that ethos is still there.
Yeah.
Um, And I think a lot of enterprise brands can evolve, but quite often the risk is that they lose their purpose. You've worked with brands, Georgia Pacific and the Southern Company, who were true Goliaths, major legacy brands. What did it take? And they kind of got lost for a while. What did you do to re-engage them in the purpose that they had really moved away from?
I'll sound a little bit like a broken record, and I
Tom's is
wasn't
like,
a one woman band by any means, but in the case of Southern Company and Georgia Power, it was, I think what really, first of all, we thought that they needed authenticity and trust, and the customer needed to feel cared for,
right.
and they didn't, so back when I was there, Georgia Power became a Olympic sponsor,
Yeah,
and Southern Company became a PGA Tour sponsor. Now I wasn't a sports specialist by any means, but it was at a time when the Olympics were coming to Atlanta. That certainly helped a lot, but they were great opportunities to really kind of take them out of their own heads,
yeah,
the powers that be, and get them thinking differently. I mean, they're already experts in their own business.
right.
However, this is going on over here. You cannot dig your head in the sand and pretend that it's not. So you have to just kind of pry open the mind sometimes and
And
introduce
make it
something different.
happen. Very quickly, what are some warning signs that a brand has lost its connection to its purpose? I mean, you talked about Tom's, which sounds like it was just, marketing mistakes, quite frankly.
Yeah. And I think the leader, kind of losing his way maybe had something to do with that too, which I have to credit Sarah for really guiding her brand all the way through to a big sale. And that's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, well, so Nike, many could say has had, especially last year, lost their way. They saw a stock drop, significant. I think it was 30%
Yeah.
in 2024. And it was because they forgot how to innovate for a minute. And, that was their ethos. I mean, and so that's an example of, and a reminder that innovation does matter. It's not just about AI and digital, all of the facts and figures and the analytics. Creativity matters, innovation matters, thinking differently matters in
It's
parallel.
it's so interesting because and this is a hot topic, and I wish it wasn't. The political landscape, when you've got individuals and companies that take a stance on A or B, um, it it really hurts. And no matter what, it typically hurts the brand and the business because there's always 50% who's not in line with what they've said. And let's face facts. There aren't brands that are just A or B. They're typically for everyone on some level within multiple demographics and multiple ages. And I think that is a great example of when a CEO makes a political decision or a campaign is so focused on something that is political that they lose their purpose.
I agree.
And I think that is just a very important thing for brands to consider out there. I've said it to our team a few times this week. No, from a PR standpoint, the idea is too political. It's too dividing. We can't do it. We would never want our brands to be in that space doing it. What advice
Yeah.
do you have for marketing leaders and CEOs and business leaders who are contemplating those sort of things today?
I think the lesson there is go back to purpose.
Yeah.
That is the filter, and through which everything else is analyzed and decided upon. And I can't think of one example of a political stance that could be congruent,
With a
or
brand.
consistent with a brand
Yeah.
or a purpose or
Yeah, I
a
totally
lasting
agree.
purpose.
Yeah, I love that. I can't believe we're at the end of our show. I've got one final question for you, and you're going to be one of the last Better At questions of the year for us. We launched Better at the beginning of the year to really help marketers sharpen their everyday skills that make a big difference. Something that's been a big learning for them, like listening or collaborating throughout their career. What is one thing you've learned to be better at that has made a measurable difference in how you lead, work, and show up in your role?
I've become better at mentoring and being mentored.
Ah,
And
love it.
I am very anxious to be mentored by younger
Reverse
professionals.
screen. Yeah,
They have a lot to teach me. I feel like I have plenty of relevance and something perhaps to offer them, but it's very much a give and take and a collaboration. And I try to listen more than I talk
yeah,
and wait until I'm really asked for actual mentoring, but to absorb anything I can from them and be the mentee again.
that's wonderful. Thank you, Laura. You've been an absolute just gem today. My goodness.
Oh.
What is the best way for our audience to get in contact with you?
My email address, Lori Oliver, it's Lori, just like yours, at inactiveco.com, or go to our website, inactiveco.com, and check us out there, and you can see how we're expressing our brand.
Well, I tell you, it's absolutely amazing. I've been there. So
Thank you.
congratulations.
Thank you.
And if you'd like to get in contact with me, LinkedIn is the best place. And that's Lori Sutorius Jones on LinkedIn. Lori Oliver from Lori Jones, thank you so much for your appearance on StrategyCast.
Thank you, Lori. It was wonderful.
That's a wrap. Thanks for joining us on today's show. We hope your strategic brains are spinning with new ideas and bold inspiration that will elevate your strategies and marketing know-how.